Hey, Patreons, welcome back to the Spotlight. This is, of course, the place where we talk to creators and other celebrity individuals in the pop culture space. I am here with Chuck Rozanski of Mile High Comics in Denver, Colorado. Chuck, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, actually.
Awesome. Gotcha. Well, you have been famous. You and I met about 18 months ago. I was in your store because my wife and I were traveling out west. I live in Michigan. And I told you at that time from a 6-year-old Marvel Comics reader, my first issue was the old Star Wars, that there was your big bifold yellow ad right in the middle, Mile High Comics, biggest comic shop in the universe. Absolutely fascinating stuff. So it was a thrill to meet you back then, and I'm so glad to have you on today. Um, I've heard the story of how you got everything started. Of course, I've read about it, but for those who don't know, how did you get into this life? How did you get started selling comics?
Well, in junior high school, I started selling comics to my friends. I actually had a friend who stole a comic from me, and I spotted it in his room and demanded it back. And he said, "I'll give you $5 to be able to keep it." And my allowance in those days was $1 a month.
Oh,
So
whoa.
we were really poor, and
Mm,
so being able to derive 5 months worth of allowance out of one comic book, I mean, the light bulb went off, and I started looking for scarce issues for my friends, and they actually turned me on to the Robert Bell catalog, the Howard Rogowski catalog, Grand Books, all the early mail order catalogs, and I started sleeping with those under my pillow. I would read them all night long. This was before there was an Overstreet, and
oh, okay.
so I was learning about comic book values and comic book prices, but I was very frustrated because I was living in American military housing over in Germany, and
Right.
comics were a big deal over there. But there was very limited access. And so it wasn't until I returned to the United States that I found a venue where I could sell comics, which was the Colorado Springs Antiques Fair. And I found a young man who had about 4,000 back issues. His mom had worked at an ID wholesaler. And he asked me if I would buy them. And so I took out a loan from my mother and paid him $140. And suddenly I was a comic book dealer. And that was at the age of,
Wow.
I was 14.
Oh my gosh. That's so crazy. So what happened from there?
Well, the first month that I was set up at the Antiques Fair was a bust. I didn't sell any collector comics at all. I sold some bulk issues. I used to sell 12 for $1 and in string bundles, and those sold. But the very next month, a gentleman who remains one of my best friends to this day, Bob Conway, walked in, and I think he spent 12 or $15 with me, and that was 10% of what I paid for that whole huge collection, and I was on my way. And Bob and I
Well,
formed the Colorado Springs Comic Club, and within a year we had 40 members, and it was really good. I mean, we ended up with uh, a business that was going, but oh my God, the prices in those days were so small. I sold Bob a really nice copy of Spider-Man #1 for $13.75,
oh my God. Oh
which
no.
is a
Yeah.
weird number. Okay, but
Yeah.
at that point I was at the University of Colorado, and the bus fare to come back to Colorado Springs from Boulder was $2.75. So I
King's ransom.
bought this Spidey one for $11, and I called Bob up and I said, "You give me 13.75, which is a round trip bus fare, and I'll the differential, the 275 was the round trip bus fare." And so my profit on the Spidey one paid for my visiting my folks for Thanksgiving, I think it was.
Oh my gosh. That's so
Yeah.
wild. And then so from there, just reading over your bio, that turned into eventually your first brick and mortar. And I know you were in California for a while, and everything has kind of coalesced over the years because we're talking about 50 years that's gone by now.
Oh yeah,
You
more than, yeah.
yeah, you have the gigantic Jason Street megastore, which is what April and I visited back in the summer of 2023. Never seen anything like it. So you have, what are the stats? What's in the store?
Well, we have more comic books here in one single spot than anywhere else in the world. There's probably, if I had to make a guess right now, I'd say I have 13 or 14 million comics in this one building, but then I have storage trailers and I actually have another storage building, which has a couple million comics in it. So I'm somewhere in the 15 million comics range. But then I have more than 300,000 trade paperbacks and hardbacks. I have a couple 100,000 collectible toys, and then posters and T-shirts and prints and portfolios and statues, and I have more than I can sell. I figured out at one point that I could sell 1,000 objects a day, and I would still have a store full when I reached 100. And that is if we didn't buy anymore. But we've already, just this year alone, we've already bought more than 500,000 comics. We bought
Unbelievable.
30,000 on Friday.
So, in a nutshell, if somebody's looking for a comic, there's a better than average chance that you've got it.
Oh
Probably.
yeah. Well, that's the old paradigm. What we
Yeah.
want now is we want to have it in every grade.
Oh, okay. And there
Okay.
are five or six grades. I'm trying to remember off
Uh-huh.
the top of my head.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair, good, very good, fine, very fine, near mint. Those are the grades that we go with. That's kind of
Right.
old school. We don't do the 8.5, 9.0, but it gets old for me. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're trying to have all books uh, at least in a $5 value in every grade going up to near mint. And so that's what I spend every day doing, is going through collections and just filling in the zeros. So
Right.
anywhere on the website where we have a zero, I might have a book where if I had my last copy and it was a near mint, it might be $30. But if I get a sixth copy of that, we might offer it in fair, even though it's in near mint. We might offer it in the fair price grade for $3.
Right. Right. Yeah, I definitely. I mean, obviously, when I was there, I bought a number of different things, comics and toys. So your first brick, just to step back again, the first brick and mortar store after you'd been selling at this antique market, there in the Denver Boulder area. What year was that first store opened up, and what did that look like?
Okay, it opened up on September 30th, 1974, and that was after 4 months of my living in a car. The prior year, 73, I had hitchhiked to conventions and totally freaked my parents out because they thought I would be
Yeah,
killed. And there were
of
several
course.
instances where I nearly was.
Oh
Um,
God.
but so they were going to visit my family in Europe. So they gave me a 63 Chevy with a bad oil leak and said, "Here, this is better than hitchhiking." And so I lived in that car and couch surfed and slept in public parks and things like that. But I was homeless for 4 months, and I finally hit it big at the San Diego Comic Con in '74. I walked out of that show with $800, real money, $800. And that was the entire working capital for the first brick and mortar store. I opened that store in what had been a coal bin for a big old giant brick bank building, huge bank building. They had boilers in the basement that were fired by coal in the 1920s and 30s. So they had a room with a chute, and they used to have coal wagons that would pull up to the chute and they would shovel the coal in the basement. And then they had some poor guy down there just shoveling coal into the boilers to keep the building warm in the winter. Well, that room became surplus once they switched to natural gas
Mhm.
boilers. So they handed me a broom and they said, "Here, you can have it for $95 a month and you can open a store in it."
Oh my gosh.
But you had
That's so.
to get
Yeah.
into my store, you had to go through another store. There was a science fiction bookstore, and this lady, Lois Newman, had the science fiction bookstore. And so you went down a set of steps, under a little bridge, into her garden level store. Then you walked through the garden level store, and got to a blank little plywood door, and behind that door there was suddenly this cavernous room. When I got it, it had a single light bulb, just one bulb with a pull string. And so my $800, the first expenditure that I made, I had to pay $400 to put in lights, just some fluorescent
Right,
lights. And then I
right.
spent money on paint and epoxy, and just to try and get the dust down.
Oh
So I
God,
spent
yeah.
two all-nighters in a row painting that floor, first with regular paint and then with epoxy over the regular paint so it would hold down. And oh my God, after then I opened the store. The epoxy was still wet in places.
Oh
It was like
no.
it was like the first day they opened Disneyland, where there was still
Oh
wet
right,
paint in the
right,
corners.
right.
Well, mine was exactly the same thing. Um, but I took in $100 on that first day, and I thought I died and gone to heaven.
After
Um,
only making $800 in your big debut at San Diego, that's wild.
Well, no, that wasn't my debut at San
No, no,
Diego.
no.
But
But that was yeah,
at San
right.
Diego. The reason I made that money was because of two portfolios that Middle Earth, a publishing company in Denver, had published. The first one was a Barry Smith portfolio, his first one, and the other one was a Frank Frazetta Lord of the Rings portfolio.
Oh my gosh,
And
okay.
they gave me $4 for each one that I sold, and I sold 100 of each of them. So I made $800 just as a commission agent selling for Middle
Oh,
Earth,
okay.
and that was
Okay.
above and
Wow.
beyond my own comic book sales. And my comic book sales paid all my expenses, but the $800 from Middle Earth opened up the first store.
The profit.
Um,
Yeah, wow. Wow. It's 1974. What did like I think of a shop now, your shop, or like the shop I shop at. I've shopped at the same comic shop, which is a bookstore, for 40 years. That's here in my town. I know they get in books every week and every month, and all this different stuff. What was having that first store? Were you getting new books in? Was it just an older comic shop? I mean, what's kind of the progression of how all that worked?
Well, it got really weird because the lady with the science fiction shop had been selling, she had a spinner and she had been selling new comics. So part of my arrangement with her was that I rented the back room, and I agreed to bring people in, but I had to have the new comic business. So she gave it to me, but that meant that I had to go out to the local ID wholesaler, who was this incredibly right wing John Birch guy, and
No.
he had a monopoly on comics in the Boulder Valley. All the IDs in those days, there were about 500 of them across America, and they were all these World War II vets, and they
Weird.
each one of them controlled a territory. Most of the territories to the east of the Mississippi were allocated by the mob. But the ones to the west of the Mississippi were a little bit more egalitarian. But anyway,
Yeah.
he became my friend, Emil Clausen, owned Columbine Distributing, and Emil liked me from day one, and I have no idea why, because my hair was long in those days. I was very leftist. He was right of Genghis Khan. I mean, he had signs up all over the distributorship. There were signs up talking about how terrible things were in Russia and how many days you had to work for a loaf of bread and all this bullshit.
Oh boy.
But
Oh my gosh.
anyway, Emil liked me, and so what he did. And part of this was my asking. He would get the comics in on a on a Tuesday, and then the following Thursday, 9 days later, he would put them out. And I went to him and I said, Emil, my business, everybody wants to read them as fast as they can. Would you let me have them the day after you get them in, once you've broken them out of the string bundles? And he said, sure, I don't care. And he gave me the Denver Boulder market. People for 100 miles around would drive to my little coal bin
Oh
because
my
I
gosh.
had the new comics a week before anyone else. And this
You had the
included
edge.
Emil's newsstands. Emil owned the two biggest newsstands, one in Boulder and one in nearby Longmont. And Emil said, no, I don't care. You can have them a week ahead of everybody else and go out and kill them. And I did. And
And
so that's
just because you asked, just we're like, I mean, I'm in sales myself. That's just sometimes how it works. You just Roll the hard six, roll the dice.
Hey, Secret Friends Unite, let me tell you about Zencaster. We use them for our show, and now they're supporting us. Zencaster is now the all in one solution making podcasting easy. It's the ultimate web based podcasting solution, provides high quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio quality content all from one dashboard. Being a creator has never been easier. And we chose Zencaster because of the ease of use, high quality output, and it makes it super easy for our guests to come on. We had multiple solutions we tried before, and Zencaster has just been the best fit for us. Why Zencaster? It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sounds and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of Zen knowing Zencaster's multi layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. Have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencaster's post production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. So, if you're interested in making an easy, high quality podcast just with the click of a browser button, go to zencaster.com/pricing and use my code SFU1. You'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Now back to the show.
I saw him. I saw he had all these guys that were breaking down the bundles, and I said, "Why can't I have him now?" Oh, we got to spray paint them first with the. They used to color code them so they knew which ones to pull off. Because their guys didn't read. Most of their guys were immigrants and they didn't read English, so they would
Right.
spray paint them. So they would color code them so they would know. Okay, today you get Verde, you go out and you pull all the Verdes off the rack and put the Nuevo Verdes on the rack. It was
Right.
just that simple of a business. And I said, Emil, for God's sake, I don't want my comics spray painted. He
No
said, well, then
kidding.
take them. Just get them out of here.
And so you got 1974, so that was this when the X-Men were really starting to hit a stride, and of course, all the I'm a Marvel guy, so I think in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
Marvel.
But you know what the
Yeah.
big seller was in those days? The
Who,
number one seller for us?
who was
Conan.
taking a Conan, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Which is
because
it's
they were
yeah,
still at the point that I took over, they were still just past the Barry Smith phase and in the early Buscema. But Roy Thomas was he was doing great writing at that point. So
yeah,
when you had Buscema, you had Alfredo Alcala inking him. And so those were great comics. But
yeah.
we used to sell Conan 2-1 over Spider-Man.
I wouldn't have guessed that in 1,000 years. That's
Well,
crazy.
that's where living history makes a difference. I can look back now and look at things that I accepted as just being commonplace in the day, and
Right,
nowadays people cannot believe it, and that's
right.
just one aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um, but if you can imagine setting up in a coal bin, but having new comics a week ahead of any store in the entire Denver Boulder Metroplex, I literally 100 miles around, people would come to shop at my little coal bin.
If I could get in the DeLorean and hit 88 and go back in time, I would love to see that. That sounds incredible. Sounds absolutely
Yeah,
incredible.
it was a great time.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you what. I have two other questions. I'll try to wind it down. So, you have this empire. I mean, 15 million comics is completely insane. But like any business, comics is changing. I have some older comics myself because I've turned into more of a digital reader. I do Marvel Unlimited and stuff like that, and I buy some new comics from my guy. But with everything that's changed, what do you think the next 10 years looks like for Mile High Comics? What do you think lays ahead?
Well, the big thing is that we're really strongly catering to a youth audience because what I spent all day today going through was a huge collection that was amassed by one of our customers who died. And his parents called us up and asked if we would come get him. And when you do that, that's a moment of trust. I mean, that's where someone has placed their faith in you. And so what I told them that I was going to try to do was to put at least half of the books that came from his collection into our $2 bins so that kids could afford to buy them and so that we would have a new generation of young readers. So, in a sense, what we're in the business of is rehoming comics. And the great news is that there are probably more than 2 billion comics that are out there that are in closets and garages and under beds. And at
Right.
the same time, the number of retail locations is shrinking
Right.
because a lot of the older guys are getting out of the business. Younger guys are finding that it's just not economically viable. You can make more. I mean, people get paid minimum wage to run comic shops, and it's a very hard and abusive business. So a lot of people are saying, "Why the hell should I do this?"
Yeah. Right.
But what that means is that more and more and more comics are coming to us, and
Yeah.
so our responsibility is to try to find ways to get them into people's hands and still cover the cost of our own overhead. Just to be very succinct about it, I own this building, this immense piece of concrete, 65,000 square feet.
It's so
At
crazy.
least once a week, I get an offer of $10 million on the building.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
I,
You're
I
right.
do not need to sell comics. I do this because it's my passion and because I really want to get graphic literature into the hands of young people and keep them from becoming digital zombies like some people who shall remain nameless. Um, and I will put the asterisk on that bitch by pointing out that when I was in the Comic Con movie 12, 14 years ago that
Yeah.
Morgan Spurlock filmed, I found out when I went to dinner with him 5 years later that they had selected me because I was supposed to represent the dinosaur. Because Morgan too only read comics on his little digital screen.
Oh
Okay.
no.
And so they wanted someone who exemplified the dinosaur paper sucker of the comics business. Me.
Oh no.
Okay. Well, guess what? It's 14 years later. I'm still here. I've been making $1 million a year for the last 14 years. Okay. In
Wow.
the meantime, everybody else associated with that film is not doing so well. Okay. Sometimes being the dinosaur comes in very, very handy. Okay, because even though there is a world filled with Philistines, there are some that are still true fans, people who actually love the smell of paper and
I
the
still.
tactile feel of those supple pages. And so we let all of you Philistines go off and sit in your little dark corners and do what you do, but the rest of us want four colors,
Oh
okay?
my
And we want
goodness.
them
Yes, sir.
right in front of us, and we want to be able to pull them out of that plastic bag 10 years from now and read them again and revisit our wanton days of youth.
I have been. I do still hunt back bins. I'm going to a Comic Con this weekend that I'm both working at and then kind of hunting and looking for new people to interview for this podcast. But I have a list of comics I collect that are out of print, that have never seen the light of day, and that's my passion in collecting. But I keep them. You're right. I keep them in little short boxes in my closet so that they're
Yeah,
safe.
yeah,
And yeah, and I will continue to do so because again, I feel very. And I also look. If you look behind me, I look for covers to frame because I have
yeah.
a my regular job. I have a bedroom upstairs. That's my office. That's filled with frames that look just like that. I'm starting to convert this room to more of that because I love seeing the images. Covers are my favorite part of comics. I love being able to tell. Picture can tell 1,000 words. That's one of my absolute favorite
Well,
things.
remember the giant covers I have on the wall outside of the
Oh yeah.
store.
Oh yeah.
I got to refresh those because they're starting to finally wear out. But
Yeah.
I pay $10,000 a piece to put gigantic covers on the outside of the store just so people know exactly what they're getting when they walk in the door here. I don't want there to be any doubt. This is a comic book store. And when you
Absolutely.
walk in here, I've set it up intentionally so that when people come to visit here, they can't see it all in a day because everything's labyrinthian. It's not like straight lines. The building itself is a very weird shape. And
Yeah.
so we kind of built into that. And so
Yeah.
we make it so just when you think you've seen it all, you suddenly discover that there's another whole alcove way over
Yeah.
there, and
Right.
it's full of silver and golden age,
Oh my
and
gosh.
or original art, or
Yeah.
portfolios, or statues, and
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of this store. It's immersive and it's intended to make people feel good. And I get to
Right.
get up every day and make people feel joyful. And that's why I'm still doing this for
Yeah.
55 years.
Oh my
I
gosh.
don't need the money. I don't care about any material gain. All I care about is the fact that I have been blessed to be able to actually do something that's fun to me, but that makes other people enormously happy. And there are
Right.
so few people in this life who are ever blessed to find that path. And I have
Absolutely.
been so blessed.
Absolutely. Absolutely correct. All right. One I lied. I have half a question.
Okay.
Very favorite comic story your entire life long. Go.
I would say that the Uncle Scrooge stories, just about any of the first couple, Only a Poor Old Man is certainly right up there. Back to the Klondike. I mean, any of those early Scrooge stories, those
Yeah.
are the ones that I like the most and that always warm my heart.
I love it. All right, last question. This one actually came from my partner who couldn't make it tonight. He had a little bit more salacious version of this question, but I dumbed it down. What is the craziest thing that's ever happened in one of your stores? Crazy story.
The craziest thing, well, we had a wedding in here. That was kind of cool. It was a Star Wars themed wedding,
Nice.
and that was kind of nice. I'm a drag queen, so
Right.
we were doing when we still had our stage. We had to get rid of it, but we used to do all ages drag here, and I had Proud Boys show up in Nazi helmets
Oh
and
my God.
battle gear with shields and batons and threatened to kill me. And that certainly was an exciting day. We had the Denver Police Department send 18 officers to form a cordon across the street to keep the Proud Boys and their supporters from literally killing me.
Oh my
So
God.
that was a little bit more adventuresome than
I would
some
say
days.
so. I would
I
say
have
so.
photos of me in full drag staring them down. I do not suffer idiots well,
Oh
and
my God. I
I
understand.
don't back down to anybody.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I appreciate that.
I come across as a kind and gentle grandpa, but deep in my heart, I am a berserker. So people learn sometimes the hard way that
Right.
even if I'm in a dress, don't fuck with me. It's just not a
Uh,
good idea.
I'm right there with you. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up. For someone who is wants to check it out, who wants to get in touch, how do how do people experience Mile High Comics besides the obvious? Like, how do they find you? How do they get in touch?
Well,
You know,
we've got milehighcomics.com, which is our website. We always have a code word going, which right now it's 50% off. Summer is the code word. But our prices that are listed, they're almost always discounted to some extent. But the street address is 4600 Jason Street, Denver. And it's right where Interstate 25 and Interstate 70 bisect each other.
mhm.
So we're only about 3 miles from downtown. The most every Uber driver, every Lyft driver in town knows how
Yeah,
to get people over to Mile High Comics.
I
We're
bet.
actually one of the top 10 destinations for the entire state of Colorado, according to the
Awesome.
Colorado Tourism Board.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Good deal. Well,
we're right behind Red Rocks.
I'd rather be at your shop 100%. Well, Chuck, this has been absolutely incredible. I got to get myself back out there because, yeah, we were traveling to Star Trek Las Vegas, so we just had the day, which is why we didn't stay longer. And I had more fun at your shop than I did there. I did thought that was not a great year for that show, but this has been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And folks, if you're listening to this on our free feed at Secret Friends Unite, you can subscribe to our Patreon for 7 days for free over at patreon.com. We'd love to have you. Chuck, take care and look forward to seeing your shop again soon.
Well, every time you come in, it's different because we buy 10 to 20 collections a day.
Oh my gosh. So crazy. Oh my goodness. All right. Bye-bye.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and podcast services around the galaxy, as well as video on our YouTube channel. You can support Secret Friends Unite by becoming a Patreon member, get bonus programs and more over at patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. Join our Discord community for even more discussions on all things geek. For all the latest updates on Secret Friends Unite, make sure to follow us on Threads at secret.friends.unite and visit secretfriendsunite.com. Find our merchandise at TeePublic and Redbubble. Thanks for listening, and may the Force live long and prosper.